Thank you. Thank you, Martin and Cindy, for letting us share in the Clapp Library. It's a beautiful place, and we're honored to be able to present here. Like Martin said, I am a member of the DAR. For people that don't know what the DAR is, it's the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. We're a women's organization that can trace our lineal heritage back to a patriot that contributed towards America's independence. And so we are non-political, but our really strengths are we want historic preservation, patriotism, and education. So today, like Martin said, we're celebrating the Marquis de Lafayette. He is an American hero as well as a French hero. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. His wife, Adrienne de Noailles, is we're going to do it in her voice of her take on his life. She was born in France, but she does speak English, and we've chosen her because she was Lafayette was a real promoter of women's rights and women's education. And so they had a real romance. There was true love, and they got married at a young age. So Lafayette was born in France in 1757. I'm sorry. He's also known as, and he's got a very long name, Marie Joseph Paul Yves Roche Gilbert du Motier Marquis de Lafayette. His parents named him with a bunch of saints' names just to protect him. He preferred to be called Gilbert. Before the French Revolution, their class system was the highest level was clergy, then nobility, and the commoners were the greatest portion of the population. 95% of them were commoners, but that was a class, they had a class system. At the age of 2, Marquis de Lafayette inherited his father's title. He lost his father, who died in the Battle of Minden in 1759. It was a fight between the British and the French. This is why he wanted to fight the British in the American Revolution. This is one of the main reasons why. So, uniting two powerful French families, they married in 1774. I was 14 and he was 16. He had already been through so much. At age 11, he studied at the College of Places, and at age 13, his life changed dramatically. His mother and his grandfather both died. He inherited his grandfather's fortune, and he became one of the wealthiest nobles in Europe. He decided to join the King's Musketeers and attend the military academy at the King's Palace in Versailles. Keep that in mind. By joining the King's Musketeers, he had to pledge his loyalty to the king forever.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here tonight and tell you about my dear husband, the Marquis de Lafayette. In August of 1777, my dear husband had learned about the American Revolution, and he was itching to fight the British. But he wanted to join the American Rebellion, as it was called at the time. He couldn't. As a nobleman, he was not permitted to leave France. And so, and because the King Louis XVI had declared neutrality against, between the war and the British and the Americans, no side could be taken, and Lafayette was just devastated. Okay. But didn't last for long. By December of 1776, he met with an American representative, Silas Deane, from Connecticut. He met him in Paris and accepted at that time a commission to be a major general in the Continental Army. Well, that was going against what the king would require. Big deal. But with his power and his influence, he was allowed to take soldiers and a ship over to America to join in with the army as a general. Now, that was a big deal to the American Rebellion at that time. So I kept asking myself, why would he do this? We had a good life in France. And looking at the reasons, he had read over the past year the Declaration of Independence that was written by the Americans, and it resonated with him. He really did believe in the precepts of that document. He believed in freedom for everyone. He was against slavery, and he believed that the people had the right to govern themselves. All of these things mattered to him. In addition, he had lost his father when he was only 2 years old, and that had to have played a big part in why he felt it was so important that he go over and help fight those British. Well, I heard that my husband arrived in Philadelphia on July 31st of 1777, and he met General Washington. General Washington named him as his aide, and it didn't take long for the two of them to become very close. Remember, my husband was only 19 years old at the time, and Washington was 45. So Washington became like a second father to him, a father that he never knew, and they became very close. As a matter of fact, we named our son George Washington as well. Thank you. Well, during the first battle that the Marquis was in Saratoga, he was wounded. I was so worried about what would happen to him because he also stayed on the field. He stayed on the battlefield until everyone else was taken off, to his own, putting himself in harm's way even more. Well, doing that really impressed George Washington, who was thought so highly of his leadership and his bravery after he did that.
So no matter how much I pled, my husband would not return to France. I had just given birth to our daughter. Lafayette remained committed to American cause and to the man he would consider his all but adopted father, George Washington. He spent his own money to buy uniforms and muskets for the men, and he lived with them during the coldest part of the winter.
It is December 19th, 1777. Now that means that the American Revolution has already been waging for over 2.5 years. It's been a year and a half since the Americans in Philadelphia had officially declared independence from the British at the Pennsylvania State House, which is Independence Hall today. Since then, things have not been going well for General Washington's army here in Pennsylvania. The British up in New York City sent an invasion fleet down into the Chesapeake. They land an army in Maryland. That army marches up into Pennsylvania. Its goal is to capture Philadelphia, the biggest city in America in those days, which was a sprawling metropolis of barely 30,000 people. The British succeed. They defeat Washington in the Battle of Brandy executive council, their rebel government, the state government, has fled as well. They're over in Reading right now. Thousands of other Philadelphia residents are now refugees out in the countryside. Washington tries one last time to force the British out of Philadelphia before they're able to dig in by launching a surprise attack at Germantown and fails and is forced to retreat. The British are dug in, winter is setting in, the weather is getting worse, and Washington's army is exhausted. The men are tired, the equipment is worn out. Washington needs to find a place to regroup, refit, and plan his next move. And he chooses Valley Forge. This location, this farming community out here, named after an iron forge that was located in a nearby valley, was only about 20 miles outside the city of Philadelphia, close enough to the British to contain them and bottle them up in the city and protect the countryside and its resources, but also just far away enough so if the British attacked, they could see it coming, and on high ground that could provide a good defensive position. And while this army is here, they have to struggle through difficult months of regrowth and rebuilding. Their supply system collapses. Supply shortages, food, clothing, blankets become ever present. And disease runs rampant. This is one of the deadliest encampments of the war. More soldiers end up dying at Valley Forge than in any single battle during the Revolution. And yet, this was also a much-needed opportunity for Washington to reorganize the army and train and reform it, using the assistance of other officers like General Knox, General Greene, General von Steuben. They proceed to do a top-down restructuring of this army. So that by the time the army leaves Valley Forge, months later, on June 19th, 1778, in spite of all the hardship, in spite of all the death that they encountered here, they're actually stronger, better trained, and better organized than they've ever been. After they leave here, they chase the British through New Jersey and engage the British at the Battle of Monmouth. That is not the end of the war, though. This war is going to wage for another 5 years. But a lot of the organizing and restructuring and reforms that they do here are going to allow this army to survive and continue for those next 5 years. I really think Washington's greatest victory of this war was not the surrender of Cornwallis and Yorktown. It's the fact that he was able to keep this army alive and functioning for 8 years. That is the battle that he fought at Valley Forge, and it is why places like this are so important in that conflict story.
There we go. So French alliance is signed in Paris. This is huge. Finally, it is not my husband's resources being used. The French agreed to a treaty of friendship with America, and as well as trade in 1778. The Continental Army now can receive supplies in support of the French Navy. The colonists' chance of winning just improved, and France has recognized America as an independent country. Great Britain responded by declaring war on France. Britain never does battle France. It doesn't have enough resources to do both battles. But now, if other countries start recognizing the United States or the America as a new country, it opens up all kinds of trade possibilities. He finally came home. The alliance already was in place, but they needed more. So Lafayette came home to obtain aid, and he was so successful. I am so proud. He convinced the king to send the French fleet north from the Caribbean Sea and to fight the British, as well as to send 6,000 additional troops, guns, munitions, ships, and money. When Lafayette returned to Boston, he was greeted as a hero. Well, he came home. So what happened next? We had a baby boy, George Lafayette. George Washington Lafayette is born in December of 1779. George Lafayette was educated at Harvard and spent much time in the United States. The last major battle of the American Revolution. In February of 1781, Lafayette is sent to Virginia and told to harass the British troops who by July are now under the command of General Cornwallis. The American and French army dig trenches to trap the British on the land. By blocking the harbor, the French Navy prevents the British from escaping by sea. October 19th, 1781, Cornwallis surrenders at Yorktown, and the last major battle of the American Revolution concludes. That was a long battle. So what happens next? The French Revolution. July 1789 through November 1799. France's costly involvement in the American Revolution, combined with extravagant spending of King Louis XVI, had left France on the brink of bankruptcy. Several years of poor harvests, droughts, cattle disease, and skyrocketing bread prices lead to unrest among the peasants and the urban poor. Many expressed their desperation and resentment towards a king that imposed heavy taxes, yet failed to provide any relief by rioting, looting, and striking. Lafayette brought the ideas of the American Declaration of Independence and rule by the people of France. He believed in a constitution monarchy, a government with a king and an elected assembly to make laws. Remember, he's a musketeer. He has sworn loyalty to the king. Unfortunately, they wanted the king and the nobles gone and blamed them for France's problems. That included Lafayette, who was a noble.
So the story doesn't end here. The Americans were doing quite well. However, back in my own country, we have our own revolution beginning. And the Lafayette fled because of all the unrest down to Austria, where he was promptly arrested and jailed. That was just the beginning of the heartache for us there. Our son George Washington was sent to live at Mount Vernon with the Washington family during this time. But I was arrested, and so was my mother and my sister and grandmother. Well, my mother, my sister, and my grandmother were guillotined. I survived only because I was allowed to go down to Austria with my two daughters, our two daughters, and go into the jail and live with my husband in Austria. That saved our lives. It was not easy. The conditions were very poor. We were...
something here.
But our family was released eventually. We were released because George Washington from the America said that my husband, the Marquis, was a citizen of the United States and could not be held. And they released him and my daughter and self. And therefore we were allowed to go back to our country and work. My husband continued then to work with the new French government. So after prison, we did go back, as I said, to France, where the Marquis worked under the new administration to try to put together a government that had better relationships and support for the policies of the common people. He was so excited when President Monroe from America invited him to return to the United States to celebrate the 50th anniversary of our winning the American Revolution. And he was the only surviving Major General from the military war. Remember, he was only 19 years old when he took that commission. So he was the last surviving Major General at that 50th anniversary. Of course he agreed and went over to join the Americans. He made a tour of the 24 states in the United States during that time. So going through those 24 states, everywhere he went, he was treated as a hero. And it was such a wonderful time for him. He had left Northampton in the state of Massachusetts in the Commonwealth, in the afternoon of June 14th of 1825, and continued his journey to Boston, where he stopped in Belchertown, also on June 14th. And he was on his way to go to Boston to lay the cornerstone of the Bunker Hill Monument on the 17th. So he's a little bit of a hurry. And he was traveling with a military escort, stopping in Belchertown on the 14th.
So this is a partial map of Belchertown, and it's a little bit, I guess there's a pointer here. Well, you see the three lakes, and then there's a stage road right here, and then there's a stage road here, and here is the center of town, and this is the Clapp Tavern, right down here. So Lafayette is said to have traveled Bay Road, so that would be Bay Road right by Lake Metacomet there, from Albany to Brookfield. James Clapp, who ran the stage route from Northampton to Belchertown, owned the Clapp Tavern. This would have been an appropriate way station on his stage route to change out the horses. No doubt Lafayette traveled in one of the fine coaches owned by the Clapp brothers. Belchertown history shares that while in Belchertown, the general stopped to see the ailing Dr. Howe, who was paralyzed and in poor health. Dr. Howe had served in the Revolutionary War as a doctor, and the two had met previously. He was Belchertown's first doctor. He was a drummer boy in his father's regiment in the French and Indian War in 1744, and he served in the American Army in 1777 on a tour of duty as a doctor, fighting all the way to Fort Ticonderoga on the northern end of Lake George. Howe's home was on Lafayette's route in a short distance from the Clapp Tavern. This didn't come out great, but this is blown up a little bit, so maybe you could see the route a little bit better. Details highlighted the stage route from Northampton to Enfield and from Granby to Enfield. And then Clapp's Tavern was located where the town common is. There's a story that the school children gathered to sing to Lafayette and give him flowers under a great elm tree that was located on the present-day Chauncey Walker Street. Others think that perhaps this took place closer to the center of town or at the Cold Spring School District. Either story is plausible, and they've been handed down through the generations. Another story that's perpetuated over the years is that Lafayette could have danced with Susanna Dwight Shaw, and that her daughter Susan was kissed by Lafayette when she presented him with a bouquet of flowers. He loved to kiss the girls. And it was well known that wherever Lafayette traveled, school-aged children were waving and giving him flowers. We see that he was really received like they quote, a rock star. So this is a nice woodcut picture that Cliff provided me. It's a southern view of Belchertown Common in the 1800s. Kind of gives you a little feel of what it might have looked like around the time that he came through. So the Bunker Hill Monument. So remember, he is on his way. He's continued on his journey through Worcester and eventually to Boston to arrive on time for his commitment to lay the cornerstone of the Bunker Hill Monument on June 17th to celebrate the anniversary of the Bunker Hill. So he really kind of flew through these towns quickly, considering he was on a stagecoach to get from New York to here. He really hustled through. While in Boston, he took some of the soil from Bunker Hill and carried it back to France. So Lafayette died in Paris at age of 76. Adrienne has died at age 43. She was quite young to die, mostly due to the hardship of prison life when they were in prison. Lafayette wanted to be buried under American soil, so George Washington Lafayette took the soil from Bunker Hill and sprinkled it over his father's grave. In August of 2002, the U.S. Congress made Lafayette an honorary citizen of the United States. So our flag flies over his tomb. So the 200th anniversary of Lafayette's trip to the U.S. Today's Lafayette will be here in Belchertown on June 14th. Members of the American Friends of Lafayette began the celebration of Lafayette's farewell tour in the United States on August 15th of 2024, and they're taking the journey following the same route that Lafayette took 200 years ago. I'll let Cliff might want to talk a little bit about that after, about your celebration here in Belchertown. In October of 1886, France gave a gift to the United States to recognize the friendship with the two countries that the Marquis de Lafayette brought together. Anybody want to guess what that gift was? Yes, indeed. So they have a copy of it back in France as well. That's great. So there's a couple cute little, things here. We have a cockade. Denise might want to talk about this. She made it.
This is a cockade. Back in the time of the Revolutionary War, people couldn't afford uniforms, and so to signify different ranks and sometimes which military side you were on, you wore this on your hat, different colors. Well, George Washington traditionally, after the war, had adopted the color of black, but he added a white center because white was the color of France, and he wanted to signify the alliance between the French and the American, and this became the official cockade of the after the Revolutionary War, the white, the black, and the white.
Thank you, Denise. And I did read that France adopted the opposite. They had the white background and they inserted the black to also celebrate our friendship and our united together. I don't have a lot more to talk about. I do have a map here, if I pass it around, if it might be easier to see of the blown up picture of Belchertown. On your folders here, you'll see that the Belchertown is having their celebration on the 14th, as well as we are up in Northampton. And is it from 1:30 to 3, Cliff?
Roughly. Lafayette's due here at 2 o'clock.
Lafayette's due here at 2 o'clock. Did you want to speak about it a little bit?
If you don't mind.
Not at all.
Yeah, on the 14th, it's a Saturday. We will be hosting the visit from Lafayette. Before that, on that same day, we will have a Living History Day at the Stonehouse Museum. Oh, thank you. Just hold it. Sure. We're having a Living History Day at the Stonehouse Museum, which is Revolutionary War era. And then at 1:30, the reenactors and whoever is participating will make the stroll up from the stone house, which is about a block away, and come up here for a ceremony to welcome the Marquis. He will be arriving by coach, and we'll have a little ceremony. He will also greet Dr. Howe. He will also dance with Mrs. Shaw and accept the bouquet of flowers from little Susie. And who knows whatever else might happen along the way. And so it should be an interesting day. The reason why we do this is partly because it's been a part of this town's lore for more than 100 years. We know that in 1911 they did at the town's 150th anniversary, they did a pageant, and this whole ceremony, this whole event was portrayed by local people, reenacting Lafayette and various other people. We know that most of the historians, when they recount the grand tour of Lafayette, they all mention that he stopped in Belchertown and relate the story of Dr. Howe and Mrs. Shaw. There's no documentary evidence to prove that it actually happened, but because the lore has been around for so long and is pretty much consistent all the way through, and there's a lot of logic to it, we think that it probably happened. It may not happen exactly the way you'll see it on the 14th if you come, but it'll be an event. So please come if you can.
And actually, you're also going to have a display of panels over at the town hall next week.
Next week, starting next Monday.
So when is that open for the public?
When town hall is open, it'll be in the auditorium right next door at Marquis Memorial Hall. There are large museum panels with lots of the information about Lafayette and his time in America. And they'll be installed by 1:30 or 2 o'clock or so next Monday, and they'll be up until Lafayette leaves.
Yeah, that's great. Also, the library is allowing the DAR to set up a display here, and starting on Wednesday. So we'll have information at that display, and the library has been collecting books about Lafayette for people to look at and possibly check out. He was a Renaissance man. He was quite the man. He was anti-slavery. He encouraged George Washington to free his slaves. And George Washington's wife owned most of the slaves, but George freed his slaves with his will. It took a long time to get us where we are today. Anybody have any questions? Well, thank you for the opportunity to present to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.